Hi, everybody. Welcome. We're going to let folks trickle in. You're here for the Gender Expansive Parenting webinar with Family Equality. And we're going to just wait a couple of minutes until we get started so that folks can join. I've also just enabled the captions, so you should be able to see that, but please go ahead and send a message if you're not seeing that. Okay, and can I get a thumbs up from a panelist if you all are seeing my screen shared?
We did for a second, but it was a document. Yes.
Is this one right?
Yeah.
Okay, great. All right. Well, welcome everybody. We're very excited to have you here on this webinar about gender expansive parenting. My name is Sarah Hyde and I use she and pronouns. I'm the Director of Program Events here at Family Equality, which is the nation's leading nonprofit for current and future LGBTQ+ families. In this work, we know that there are so many different ways to parent in a world that is hostile towards queer and trans people. So we thank you for your interest in parenting beyond the binary. We're really excited to share space tonight for this common goal. A quick note on logistics. In the first 45 minutes or so of this panel, you're going to hear stories from our panelists about their journeys with gender expansive parenting. This will be followed by a general Q&A session once everybody has shared. If you have any general questions during the event, you can click the Q&A button on your screen and add your questions there, and we'll do our best to answer as many questions as we can. If your question is for a certain panelist, you can put their name in your question as well. So please remember to post those questions through the Q&A option and not the chat option. That is all of our housekeeping. And so with that, we're going to go ahead and get started with our panelist introductions. So each panelist is going to introduce themselves and share a bit of an overview of their family story. So the identities that make up their family, ages of their kids, where they live, and then they'll also share how they define gender expansive parenting and how they came into it. So to kick things off, I'm wondering if Rebecca, you would be willing to go ahead and start us out.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Sarah. And I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for having me, y'all. I am Rebecca Willman. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Vice President for Community Engagement and Programs here at Family Equality, so I work here. I am just going to give a disclaimer that my spouse is doing bedtime with my kids, so you may hear that in the background, but I have locked the door, so they should not get into the room. I have 4-year-old twins. I'm a white, Jewish, cis femme. I live in the Southeast. I am married to a genderqueer, trans, non-binary spouse. And we actually created our family with donated embryos from another queer family with a known egg donor. So our kids are full siblings with our friends' kids. Our half sibling, they are also half siblings with our other friends' kids, who's the egg donor. It's very queer, it's very lovely, and I'm really grateful to be here tonight. On gender expansive parenting, I think I tend to be someone who goes to the root to be as honest with everything that I'm trying to do. And I think what is at the root of my parenting, or our parenting, I'll say on behalf of Al, my spouse, and I, is the idea that our kids are not sponges. They're not like blank slates of clay to be molded. But the idea that they are born with the potential to be exactly who they want to be, and that my role as a parent is to listen, to witness them, to create a foundational home where they are free to explore themselves in relation to the world, whether it's about their gender or their interests or what they find entertaining. With regard to gender, though, that means talking about gender in really non-essentialized ways, while also validating what they're learning about social norms. You know, we want to be expansive, but we want to be grounding. We want them to confidently navigate the world without having them feel like they need to be put into boxes. And we're in an interesting point developmentally because they really want to know the rules. Like they really want to get things right. And they get a sense of pride and confidence when they're like, I know this thing. Like I wouldn't touch the stove right now because it's hot, you know? And then I'm like, yeah, babe, you're navigating it. Like you're doing it, you know? And so with gender, you know, we talk a lot about you can't tell someone's gender by looking with them, whether it's a person or a character in a book. But we can know more if we ask someone their pronouns or how they identify. And so we talk a lot about pronouns in our house. We talk about how those things may fit with what we think about someone. And I feel like we're very lucky. We have a very diverse group, gender diverse group of friends. And but I think at the heart of gender expansive parenting is like, what kind of parent do you want to be? And that is really the way that I navigate this and so much of the other parenting that I do.
Yeah, I love that. I know I'm not going to touch the stove when it's hot. Thank you so much, Rebecca. Violet, would you care to introduce yourself next?
Sure. First, thank y'all for letting me be off camera. I just am so feeling crappy right now. And I really wanted to put my energy into answering these questions and not worrying about my appearance tonight. Um, my family is basically me and my daughter Izzy. I just turned 39 this month and she's 8. I'm mostly cisgender and queer, though in the 90s and the 2000s, I would have called myself bi. And of course, we're talking about the binary today, and you'll get an idea for my opinion on the binary and why I don't so much use that term anymore. But my daughter is a trans girl and she's quite proud to be herself, which makes me feel pretty great as her parent. And we moved to LA. It will be about 2 years ago on July 1st. And gender expansive parenting to me, it came naturally at first because growing up, I was what people would call a tomboy because I'd rather climb trees than play with Barbies. And that was always very confusing to me and kind of hurtful as a child because I felt like I was not living up to some unwritten expectations by just being myself. And so when I had a child, I already knew that I wasn't going to force them to adhere to any gender stereotypes and that I would do my best to not belittle or invalidate them or make them feel inadequate for being whatever way they ended up being. So, gender expansive parenting to me is basically that. It's just validating my child's existence and honest expression for whatever it is and how it changes and evolves over time. And that's kind of a big one too. It's not just, just because she says one thing today, if it's something different tomorrow, I'm not going to force her to adhere to what she said yesterday either. And my goal in this is basically just to be listening deeply to her and to guide her towards the truest expression of herself at all times. And I don't know if y'all follow Gabor Mate's work, but I'm kind of obsessed with him. And he talks about authenticity as being one of our children's basic needs, and not just children, just all humans need to be able to be authentic. And so just guiding our children towards their authenticity, I think is really doing everyone a favor, even if it's a little bit harder as we kind of try to, brush aside the binary and like pave the way in a certain way. So yeah.
I love that, Violet. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm going to remember the authenticity as a basic need. I think that's really powerful. Okay, Eli and Krista, will y'all wrap us up with the intros?
Hello, Krista is doing, I think this is third round of bedtime. So she will be back down whenever Nico, I'm Eli, my partner is Krista. Nico is nearly 2 years old and just managed to climb out of the crib. So we're in a transition phase of how we get to sleep. And Krista will come back down whenever that becomes feasible. In the meantime, my pronouns are they, them. Krista is she, they. Nico, we generally use they most of the time. We live in Brattleboro, Vermont, and we co-run Shapeshifters, which is a custom-sized chest binder company, which is relevant because it is by trans people, for trans people, and between our friends, our coworkers, our employees, and our customers. I could go a month without speaking to a cisgendered person. This is not, I'm pretty sure this is rare as a way of living, but it's sort of how it's happened for us. And our intensely well-connected trans and queer community up here in Southern Vermont, Northern Massachusetts, Southwestern New Hampshire, this area has carried us through the plague, running a business, having a child, all of it. We live with and by the grace of our community, and it's been really lovely. We both tried to get pregnant for a really long time, Krista and I, I was not the first choice for either of us, but I'm the one who got it. So I spent a lot of my time in pregnancy talking and speaking and writing about how it felt and how I thought it was going to turn me into a woman finally, and it really didn't. And I came out of it with less of a gender than ever. So now we have this child who, so far as we can tell, has not grown a gender yet. Nico's a COVID baby. They were isolated until daycare, which started last September. So it's only been a semester of daycare. And daycare is a deeply hippie ex-Waldorf forest preschool that gets everyone's pronouns right. So far as we can tell, Nico hasn't grown a gender yet, and I'm hoping to spare them that for as long as possible. We'll see. Language is still an emerging thing, so who knows? But I deeply vibe with gender expansive parenting as a practice of giving your child freedom. There's so many things that you have to set as hard limits, as hard no's for your kids. No, you can't eat the lead paint. No, you can't drink the spoiled milk. No, 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 no. This doesn't have to be one of them. And the more freedoms that we can open up and the more gates we can open, the better.
Thank you so much, Eli. I'm also going to steal the term grow a gender. That is perfect. And I do see some questions coming in through the Q&A. Thank you. Keep those coming, and our panelists will answer some as we go along in that Q&A, and then we'll also come back to them at the end. So our next question for our panelists, I'm going to also put into the chat just in case it helps anyone to be able to read that question. We would love to hear what practices you incorporated into your parenting to support gender freedom for your child or children. And we can either go, whoever wants to go first can kick us off. Or we can go in order again.
Go ahead, Eli.
Okay, I'm already unmuted. I'm on a roll. Reading books to Nico, I substitute language wherever it feels right. The Little Engine That Could is a favorite in this house, and it contains the phrase "good boys and girls" over the mountain, maybe a dozen times. So I say "good little children." I doubt Nico notices, but maybe someday they would notice if boys and girls were the only options. So if I just take that out and say "good little children," then there is not that narrowing of the world implicit in the story. A lot of books like that, when I'm reading them, I just put different words in wherever it feels right or important. Nico has no gender online. I use they, them in Facebook posts. I don't know if this is important now, but it feels like laying the groundwork for later. And I can't emphasize enough also sending them to a forest preschool where everybody wears the pants just because there's ticks and also snow sometimes, that gets everyone's pronouns right and also doesn't care if a kid, in fact, I wouldn't say they don't care. They deeply care if a kid comes in next week with different pronouns and they put in the effort and they get it right. Having that support on the day-to-day basis was a huge part of our daycare selection process. And again, we expect it to be more relevant in the coming years than it is right now when language development is still a thing, but having the groundwork there and getting them into the daycare that we really like for this.
That's a really good tip. Just changing language in books as you read to make it more inclusive. Thanks for that. Becca or Violet, are either of you ready?
I could just piggyback off of that because I wasn't going to answer this question at first because I thought I kind of already answered it with our intro, but it's true. That is a thing that seems like it's a small change, just changing language. That is pretty basic because I notice all the time in so much media that I watch, people are always like wife and husband or man and woman, and I'm just like, how hard is it to just say spouse or just say person? And I think that's a subtle change that can actually make a huge difference.
And it sounds like both of you are modeling that for your children so that they're going to be fluent in that language without even realizing it, which many of us did not grow up in a home or in communities where there was that kind of gender expansive language or framing of the world. And so we've learned it as young adults, teenagers, adults, older adults, whatever age range we're in right now. But creating just that immersive gender expansion that they're swimming in and they don't even realize it is kind of a beautiful thing. Becca, I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, I was like clapping with Eli about because the little engine that could, man, they love that book. And we do the same thing. Sometimes we'll be like the good little girls, boys, trans, and non-binary children, or sometimes we'll be like the good little children or whatever, but we do the same thing. And we do that in books all the time. We still do it. And it's interesting. So I have twins. They just turned 4, so they're still feeling very toddlerish to me. Star was assigned female at birth. Sam was assigned male at birth. And right now they are like super cisgender, which is really interesting for me and my spouse. And they may stay that way like for eternity. And so one of the things that we do is always come back to them like self-identifying. So if someone's like, how are you doing? Or they may mistake Sam for a girl because he has long hair and sometimes he wears bow socks or pink and flower pants or skirts or whatever, being like, Sam, did you want to tell this person that you're a boy or would you like me to? And a lot of times he'll say no. And so really like always leaving the door open for the expansion to happen, the change, right? There's like this foundation that they are able to decide. And that doesn't mean that they have to be that way forever. I think, like when it comes to their clothes, they choose their clothes. When it comes to their toys, they choose their toys. Star right now really wants princess dresses and ballet, and Sam really wants to build stuff. And you know what? You got it, kid. Like again, it comes back to me wanting to support exactly who they want to be, and say to them through my actions, like, you're perfect in who you are. Your interests are valid, and I want to nourish and feed who you want to be and what you're intrigued by. I think really we want to instill in them that their curiosities and interests are valid and worthy, whether or not they seem conformist or whether or not they seem expansive. And that's not up to us to make that call. That's up to them. One of the things that I debated on sharing, but I feel like y'all are here. This is why we're here to talk. So I'm going to share it and be real. Again, with the age that my kids are, young kids are very literal. And again, they're trying to figure out the rules. In our home, we don't talk about bodies as gendered, but we are trying to help them understand the world and instill feelings of safety and belonging. And so this may be a little bit tricky or oversimplified for like our adult and gender diverse or gender expansive communities. There are certain ways that we have talked about bodies. Sam is the only person in our house who has a penis, and he knows that cis boys typically have penises. He right now says that he is a cis boy. And he also knows that many trans girls have penises, and he knows that there are many non-binary folks that also have penises. And so we've really tried to provide expansive information, especially in relation to what I was provided as a kid, but not so expansive that genders and bodies are meaningless and that they don't know where they fit or how to fit. For my son, who likes to be called my son, it is important for him that those things are seen and named. Yes, you belong in this world. Yes, your body is perfect. And so again, the way that we talk about these things is all open to change. As they get older, we'll talk about more and more nuance. That said, the only thing is we do a lot of talk about pronouns rather than girl, boy, non-binary. They know that people can use she, her, she, they, he, they, all of the pronouns, none of the pronouns. And that is typically how they opt to identify people.
Thanks, Becca. And I've had the joy of getting to spend some time with Sam and Star, and I just can't tell you how it feels to have a 3.5-year-old ask you what your pronouns are, or ask me what my sweetheart's pronouns are, or walk around and say, when someone says that their pronouns are he, they, that means you use he and they. Those are what 3.5-year-olds are doing in Becca and Al's home, and I think that's so beautiful. And, you know, I will say as a gender queer femme, I have a lot of the same interests as Star. I would say that we have a similar fashion sense. And so even Star and Sam having an interest in typical girl things or typical boy things in a stereotypical way, there can still be gender expansiveness in that. And I just love all the possibilities that are there. So we're going to move on to our next question. I did see someone in the chat asked if this is being recorded, and it is. We're also planning on doing a little summary at the end that we'll send out via email in a couple of weeks with some of the notes. So our next question for our panelists, I will put into the chat again. I think that Violet might want to start us off with her answer to this question, but we would really benefit from hearing about what challenges have come up and how did you deal with them in your gender expansive parenting journey?
Sure. I'm assuming I'm starting because this is going to be a long story. I'm going to try to keep it under 3 minutes though. So I mean, the biggest challenge that I faced with my trans daughter is that we were living in Texas. And so it was basically the state's political agenda that was the challenge. If you hear her, that's her on the patio painting and knocking on the window right now. So my response to that was maybe considered extreme because I moved us 1,500 miles away to another state and region. But I would say that that was extreme, but I've noticed that a lot of other parents are making that same decision. So it's seeming to become less and less extreme these days to make that kind of decision. Oh my God, I'm so distracted by the knocking. Hi. Okay. So I started to basically, like, politically in Texas, kind of started to see the writing on the wall in 2019 with Texas's response to gender expansive parenting. And so I kind of just like made a mental note and kind of started maybe subconsciously making strategic plans because we had a really well-established life in Texas and all our family is still there. But I knew it wasn't going to be right for us long term. So I started putting things into place to make the move possible. So in my case, I had to get support from her dad because we legally share custody. But I did that the day that Greg Abbott and Ken Paxton published their directive. I just was sure to get his confirmation via text so that I could have it, on record that moving her out of state was going to be the next viable move. And then I started working on my resume. And one of the positive things that comes out of these type of crisis situations is that there are a lot of people willing to help out. And I found that during this time more than any other time I've seen in my life. And so Rainbow Kids is a group based in LA for queer families. There's also another group called Rainbow Warriors, and Rainbow Kids is kind of mostly for LGBTQ plus parents and families, and Rainbow Warriors is more for LGBTQ plus kids. And we're basically a member of both of those groups, but it was the former that I basically reached out to all of my network and I was like, look, this is what we have to do. We've got to move. Any and all connections and support and ideas, just fucking I'm sorry, my language, just let me have them. And So I, sorry, that's how I was
That's
connected
okay.
with Rainbow Kids. And they hooked me up with a resume writer who was willing to donate time basically to help people in my situation. And so he helped me beef up my resume and create a strategy for finding a job in LA. Um, I'm gonna try to skip around because this is such a long story, but we did decide on it was basically either New York or LA. And because of Rainbow Kids is basically why we chose LA. I was following this YouTube channel called Self-Made Millennial, and she like helps people find jobs. I basically followed all of her advice, which is how it totally worked. And I got a job in LA within 3 months, and it was the perfect job to make this situation possible. I reached out to Erin Reed on Twitter about our situation, and she told us to create a GoFundMe, which I did, and she boosted, and we got our move to LA completely funded in a day because of her exposure. I responded to media also when they contacted me because I knew that if I spread this story, then our GoFundMe would get more attention. And this is kind of like the big point that I want to make about the challenges and the way I dealt with the challenges is that a lot of people in my circle and even in my family kind of looked down on me for going and speaking with the media about our situation as if I was like selling myself or selling my family. Um, and in a way, maybe I was, but the situation was so that God forbid you find yourself in a crisis like that. Like, wouldn't you do everything in your power to get your child to safety? And that's what, and so I, like I said, I played very strategic, made very strategic moves and decisions, and not everyone understood what I was doing, but it worked, and we're here now, and life is not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but it is vastly improved from what it was. And it all sounds really easy to talk about it now, but I definitely felt like I was going to drop dead from a heart attack from all the stress that those first like 6 months of 2021. Or was that 2022? I can't even remember now. But as long as we can continue to afford to live here, this feels like a place I can stay and raise my child, which is huge. And that's why I made all the decisions that I did. So, yeah.
Thank you, Violet. I'm really glad that you got to where you are, and it really resonates just hearing, wouldn't you do anything for the safety and well-being of your child? So I really appreciate your story. Becca or Eli or Krista, if you're there, pass it over to y'all.
Krista's still upstairs. I have a very short and lighthearted story in comparison, which is just that both grandmas, both of our mothers, who are wonderful parents and are wonderful grandparents, and we love them and Nico loves them, they cannot deal with they them pronouns, which is fun for me, and especially not for a baby who they think they know. The impulse for the grandma to have the authority has been really strong, and it's something that we have to strategically decide whether we're going to push back against at any given moment. If there is like a gendered effusive expression of affection, like, oh my sweet grandson, oh my sweet baby boy, maybe that's a moment where we just step back. The day I gave birth, my mother on the phone asked me what restrooms my child would use in kindergarten. That I pushed back against after I'd had some sleep and like collected myself about that, because the child was literally not 24 hours old. And it's different when it's family who you otherwise get along with, or family who you are invested in having a good relationship with. The ongoing challenge of just pick your battles, push here, don't push there. Hey, this wasn't okay. That's been just an ongoing, I don't even want to say it's a fight, but challenge is the word.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is a challenge that many parents share is how do I bring relatives into this gender expansive parenting approach when they're struggling with it? So I think that is very real and probably a lot of folks who are on this call can relate to. What about you, Becca?
Yeah, I mean, and I think to Eli's point, like that is also a thing about parenting about gender and not, right? It's like, when do you start feeding your kids? When do you start not when do you change the nighttime routine? How long are they going to be in the cribs? How long are they going to be in your room? Are they going to co-sleep forever? Like whatever it is, there's always like 45 bajillion things that everyone's going to say, and grandparents are going to push harder and they're going to push our buttons more. So it's just all of it. And I think the picking our battles is really important. I think I don't have like a super strong answer to this question because I think, again, my kids are very young. I don't feel like we've been in places where we have to navigate a lot. I mentioned earlier that sometimes when people misgender Sam, right, they mistake him for a girl. He currently identifies as a boy. One of the things that I'm curious about with him is like, what is it in you that feels like you don't want to speak up? Is it truly that you don't mind someone identifying you in a way that you are not? Or is there something there that makes you not want to speak up for yourself? And so there's little things like, again, it just kind of goes to that like root of what I want to do as a parent, which is instill in my kids that they let's get Krista in that screen, is like, wanting my kids to know that they are valued and who they are, and that gender oftentimes is going to be the secondary issue to all of it, and encouraging in my kids that they are always empowered to seek their truth and say their truth, and hopefully feel empowered to do that as much as possible, at least as much as they feel safe. So, but stay tuned. Ask me again in 6 months or a year, because like this is a wild ride.
Yeah. We'll have a follow-up after their 5th birthday.
Yeah.
Thanks, Becca. So we're moving into our final question for the panelists before we do audience Q&A. And so our final question, I'd love to hear from Krista if you're ready. Welcome, Krista. What advice would you give to someone who wants to parent beyond the binary?
You want to start since I've sorry, I was dealing with the crying toddler and still kind of crying.
Yeah, they'll get there. They've been getting there for a while, but they'll get there. What advice do we give? Find your people.
Yeah.
We couldn't do this without community, without especially like other parents of small kids, other parents of small kids who go through gender stuff.
Yeah, I think we've been really lucky like to live in our particular area of Vermont where everybody's just kind of like, yes, this is what we're doing now. This is the culture now. And so we're just all in. All the teachers, all the parents are just like, even if they don't get it, they still like, they're like, okay, this is just how we do it now. But yeah, finding people who do at least respect it, I think is really important. And that might be hard. Like, I don't have any advice on how to find.
Yes, you do. Go to picnics.
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah. I'm the one who gets dragged along to the event. So.
Go to Pride Family Picnic. If you got one or anything like it, look for family-friendly events at Pride and find other people running around with babies. What else did we do when we first moved here?
Got involved in community theater.
Find the gays in theater. Join committees, boards.
Maker markets are a great place to find other queer people.
Theater
Can
and
you repeat that?
crafting is where we found them.
Sorry, what were you saying?
Can you repeat what you said, Krista?
Go to maker markets. Like
Maker
local
market.
craft fairs.
Yeah.
You find a lot of queer people like just making a living on making art because having a regular 9-to-5 job is soul crushing for a lot of people.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Find
Awesome.
people. Find friends. You need them.
Find your
You can't do
people.
this alone.
No, definitely can't. Awesome. Violet or Becca? Any advice you would give to somebody?
Yeah, I have a lot of things. I think the biggest thing is like start as early as you can. That's my first one is like kids are wise and smart. Um, like Sarah, you said, my kids are asking people their pronouns when they were 2 and 3 years old. And it's like, people are like, oh my God, I know grownups who can't do that. And it's like, of course you do, because they've been imprinted and like they have all of the conditioning. And so like, let's expand the imprint. You know what I mean? Like, let's give them infinite possibility from the beginning. And so, kids are so wise, like give them the benefit of the doubt and just start. I think one of the other things that we've kind of talked about, all of us, I think at different spaces or at different moments tonight is like, let's not require our kids to define themselves all the time. Like, let's just let them show us who they are. And then let's love them for it. We don't need like if you're going to give them a foundation, let them lean on being kind or being loving or trusting or being generous. Like, do the things that will make the world better, but don't expect them to define themselves. Embrace the gray, embrace the awkward phases, the weird haircuts, the awkward dressing phase, like whatever it is. But are they loving? Are they kind? Check, you're doing a good job. I think kind of on that same line, the world is like really cruel and it's unapologetic. And I think a lot of us at this point have heard the phrase like healed people heal people. And so I like to think about, instead of asking our kids to conform, let the safest place be your home. Safe people create safety for other people, right? Free people create freedom for other people. So this is about you and your family, but it's bigger than that. It's like, if we make healing and safety and freedom a priority and an expectation in our home, they will go out and they will give it to the world. So I'd like, do it with wild abandon, even if it terrifies you. Do it for your kids, do it for all of us. And then I think just, what Eli and Krista were saying, like there is community and it may be really hard. I am in the South. I'm staying in the South. I don't think that we're moving anytime soon. There somewhere nearby are queer parents, somewhere nearby are other queer people. They may be closeted too, but seek them out. And if you don't know where to turn, start with organizations like Family Equality, like call us and let us help you find it. You don't have to do this alone. And not only that, but you also, you will, in so many of these instances, one day become a person who's standing on a panel talking about how to do this, because one day you'll be like, oh my gosh, I'm doing it. And you will be there to do it for other people. So don't not ask for help. Don't not look around.
Yeah. So I heard find your people, ask for help and look around, start as soon as you can, and let the fluidity happen and let kids learn how to be people in every which way, and ride that ride with them. Thanks, Becca. Violet, was there anything you would add advice-wise?
Sure, it sounds like some of what I'm going to say is going to be a bit of a repetition, but I kind of have a two-part answer. And the first part to this answer seems easy, right? Just parent them the way that you wish you'd been parented. And in my case, that I wish that the binary wasn't such a standard or that the stereotypes weren't so upheld. But trying to basically cut a new path through societal and cultural norms is extremely hard, because this stuff is really ingrained. And so it takes kind of, you can hear the way that I speak that I tend to like approach things in like a strategic way. So it, like, some of it takes just some self-reflection, right? To make sure that we're not perpetuating things that we don't believe in the way that we react or respond to our children's behavior and choices. So yes, parent them the way you wish you'd been parented, but in order to do that, you probably are going to need to do some self-reflection. And the big part that I think is a repetition of what other people already said is look for a supportive community, because it really takes a village. And if you're the only person in your child's life, and that was the case for me and my child for a while, um, then the majority of culture and society is still going to kind of override what you're trying to do with just within the walls of your home. And I keep saying you, but I'm talking about me. Like, I got really exhausted trying to do it alone. And so, do some self-reflection. It would be one call to action. And then find a supportive community would be another call to action. And I think another thing that would be worth mentioning is like, just you're gonna have to fortify yourself a little bit, because sometimes these are tough conversations that we have to have. And we have to have them kind of a lot, and we have to have them with adults that are already set in their ways. And sometimes we have to have these conversations on a dime. Like if you're witnessing an adult speaking to your child and affirming something that you don't want to perpetuate, it's really important to be able to respond in a moment, but in a way that is supportive. Because if you alienate that other adult, then they're just going to shut you out and not listen to you anyway. Um, but if you miss that chance, you can always come back later and speak to your child and have a teachable moment just with your child. And if you miss the chance with the adult, chances are you'll get another shot at it, because it won't be the last time that they try to perpetuate those things. So, you can uh if you're not good with confrontation, you can kind of prepare yourself in a way. And what has always helped me throughout this whole process is the literature. Like, I just always go back to like PubMed, and I'm reading all the articles, and I'm learning, like, how do you speak to a person who's not supportive? Because that was actually one of the Q&A questions that I was trying to answer, which is why I missed what how y'all were answering this question. Was like, these people who, are not affirming to our children, whether they're in our family or in our communities, they are also like human beings with emotional needs, and they were probably wounded as children also. And so if you can figure out how to speak to their heart in a way that doesn't make them defensive and shut down to you, then you're more likely to actually reach them and have them come around to be more affirming, even if it takes time. So anyways, I'm pretty sure I went over on time again.
Violet, time is just a construct, just like gender, so don't worry about it. But I love that so much of your answer was focused on resourcing yourself as a parent, and that this is really kind of a soul journey that parents are going on, and that there are a lot of challenges that can come up. And I love the encouragement of, if you don't get it right one time, don't worry, there will be plenty of other opportunities to try out different responses and different approaches. But it sounds like you would recommend that folks utilize any resource they can that will help fortify themselves, as you said, whether that's therapy, finding a support group for other queer parents or parents who are raising kids in a gender expansive way, reading the books. And I am not a parent, but I'll just add, being forgiving of yourself as well, that no parent is perfect, and you won't be perfect in this journey, and that's okay. And everybody who's here in this space right now is trying it and doing it together. And there is a lot of freedom in that as well. I love the quote that Becca had said, that the freedom brings more freedom, and it's just kind of this growth process that keeps on going. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into our Q&A from our attendees. Thank you to everybody who's been putting things into the chat. Keep them coming, because we have about 15 minutes. So somebody asked, I'm curious to hear more about empowering kids to self-identify and feel like they can correct adults who are misgendering them, kind of like what Rebecca was speaking to, and curious to hear from Violet with the perspective of an older school-age child.
Actually, what Rebecca was saying about how she's raising her kids, I think is like, it's like so foundational, because in order for a school age child to be able to address an adult misgendering them, they kind of have to have that foundation and that confidence in not only like their identity, but also like the framework and the language that they're coming from. And so I try to do the same with her, with my child, teaching her about all the different ways of expression and all the different genders, and how it doesn't even have to be she, her, it can be she, they. And I think just empowering them to understand the words as much as they understand who they are, those two things put together can help them respond in a way to an adult that's not like gonna make that adult be angry and defensive, which is obviously the other thing that I'm always trying to do, is to disarm the person who's really trying to, like, who wants to attack, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I agree with you, Violet. I think I try to encourage my kids. I will say I've watched my spouse do this a lot, right? We've been together for 15 years. They've been they identify as non-binary, transgender, and use they, them pronouns. And, it's been a practice for me over the years to like watch them when they do speak up, when they don't. There are times when I speak up, there are times when I don't. And I think ultimately what matters most is, do our kids have a sense that they are okay to be themselves at the end of the day? That is what matters the most, because then they can decide for themselves in a moment, am I okay enough right now to speak up, or am I too exhausted and I'm just not gonna? And both of those are good answers, right? Like both of those things are totally legit. And what I hope for my kids is that they just feel empowered to make the choices that are best for them in the moment, because they feel comfortable and supported in who they are. And ultimately, at the end of the day, know that this person is a fleeting moment that's not going to matter. That said, over time, those things build up. And of course, it eats at you and it wears on you and you get tired, and those cycles are going to come. But I'm hopeful that the foundation is that they have a sense of who they are, and that they believe that they are worthy of being and saying who they are when they want to.
Absolutely. And I would just add too, I've done a lot of work with queer and trans middle schoolers and high schoolers, and in the conversations that you as parents are having about power dynamics with your kids, in age appropriate ways as they grow up, I think that identifying the power dynamic of being a young person correcting an adult on your pronouns or how you would like to be referred to, being able to vocalize what can feel scary about that or what can feel wrong about that. Like adults are supposed to always be right or always have the answers. And so who am I to tell them that they're wrong? That those ongoing conversations happen about adults sometimes are wrong and only you know who you are, just like Rebecca was sharing. And that conversation about power can be wrapped into so many other kinds of conversations that folks might be having with their kids around consent and boundaries, and that could be a whole other webinar. So I will read our next question. My spouse is non-binary. Our home is a safe and loving environment. We are part of a larger family that would like us to stay closeted. How does one respond to people we love, who we don't want to cut off, who say we're going to confuse the other children in the family? Thank you for sharing this. Eli, is that a I have thoughts face?
Listen, I have had a number of people in my family say you're going to confuse the kids. And my response has been, kids are the ones who get it. Every time, try them. Your kids are smart. They'll get it. It's going to be okay.
When we first moved to this area, a lot of our friends that we first made had younger kids, like I think 7 at the oldest. And we heard from every single one of our adult friends that it was their kids who were correcting them about Eli's pronoun.
Yes.
And I also frame it as like a compliment to the kid. Your kids are smart. They can do this. I promise they're going to impress you. Try it. They're going to impress you and you're going to be so proud of them. So like driving it as a positive force is what's worked for me generally.
Totally.
Oh my gosh, yes. I want to piggyback on that because like I think the key is always like positive and loving, right? Because I mean, I feel like I'm beating a dead horse at this point, but it's like these people that want to be judgmental and be rejecting, it's like they want ammunition, to be right. And like if you can surprise them with love and acceptance towards them, it at least, in my experience, it at least like takes them off guard long enough to where it almost like you can see the circle, the computer, the loading symbol on their head, and then
Yeah.
and then in that instance you might actually be able to like get through to them. But also the other thing I would say is that like you make an effort with love, but like if you still can't bring them along, then at the end of the day that's their choice, and it's so painful and hard to leave sorry to leave family members behind. But
No.
if they don't want to come with you, that's their choice, and at the end of the day, you have to be okay with that, or we had to be okay with that. I should use I statements. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I really hear what you're saying, Violet, and can appreciate the depth of emotion that it brings. I think one of the things that I often ask myself when I feel scared is, what do I want my children to see me do, and what do I want to give them at this moment? And I think we don't have this as much with my family. My family is really loving and accepting, and Al's family, is a mixed bag. And we ultimately have to make the best life for our kids and make sure that they are our first priority. Um, and it's like, who do you want to be in the world ultimately? Like if people are asking you to closet yourself, like that is not really loving, but there is fear there. And so maybe there's like compassion that you can bring in, like Viola was saying, like how can we be disarming? How can we approach this with love? And then also recognize that fear comes from a lack of familiarity. Are these people willing to have a conversation with you, take baby steps? Are there compromises that you can do on the way? Because for most of us who have come out as queer, found, our identities maybe not at birth, we've had our own processes. And so remembering to let other people have their processes as well. And doing it with love. And then also with like, it's okay at some point, like Violet said, to be like, you know what, this isn't good for me and my family. And I'm sorry. When you come around, I'll be here. And maybe we can try again in a year. My hope is that people ultimately come around.
Absolutely. Thanks, Becca. Okay, so I'm wondering if maybe we can have just one or two brief answers from panelists for this last question, because we have a couple things to say as we wrap up. This question says, for anyone who uses they, them pronouns for very young children and don't have a queer parenting community, how do you explain that to other parents? And are you able to make any friends?
So I keep beating the drum of we do have a queer parenting community. And also I have my family of birth in Texas and in Kentucky, in specifically Southern Baptist small town Kentucky. And the explanation for they, them pronouns on Facebook, which is where I come in contact with this set. The explanation is just we're being private. I don't try very hard with the Bible Belt family that I have, because I've learned that the harder I try, the more distance grows. The harder I try to be like, hey, this is me, this is us, this is what we're doing here, queer and proud of it, the more I lose them. And so I just sort of go, we're being private, and I move on. Are you able to make any friends amongst folks who are we able to make friends amongst folks who we can't?
I mean, not that this is a friend, but honestly, my mother doesn't quite get it. Like, Eli goes by they, them, and we spent a long time trying to like explain that when we were originally dating. And like, she's not from the South, she's from Jersey, so like a different kind of conservative-ish. But like, it's kind of like I was saying before, there are going to be people that they don't get it, they'll never get it. But if they have a connection to you, and they feel it's important to like keep up a relationship with you, they'll go along with it anyway. And maybe they'll get it later down the line, but they'll still respect it. And like, sometimes that's the best you can hope for some people. But yeah, I think it's really easy to assume that everybody you come across is just going to be completely like off-put by everything, but that's not the case for most people.
Reject the binary. Reject the binary of accepting or not accepting. There's a huge gray area to live in there.
That's very true. And who has this question, if you want to reach out to me and my team, we can send you some resources about how to have those conversations if you want an easy way to explain they, them pronouns to someone who's new to that concept. So we'll put our email into the chat, and I have just a couple links to put into the chat. First of all, thank you so much to our panelists tonight. It's so appreciated that we can co-create this world of gender freedom together. And I think one of the most impactful ways you can do that is as a parent. So kudos to all of you and to the folks who are here in our audience tonight. If you do have a couple of minutes to fill out a survey, we'd love to know what you thought of this webinar, what you might want in a future webinar. That link is going into the chat right now. We also have another virtual group coming up on February 8th. We're going to be discussing book bans in our Navigating School Challenges as LGBTQ Parents resource group. So we would love to invite you all to sign up for that group if you're interested in support and resources and discussion around book bans targeting queer and trans books. Lastly, if you have any questions or you want to be connected to any of tonight's panelists, you can reach out to us at program@familyequality.org. I'll send that information and a couple of other resources in a follow-up email. And with that, thank you all again, and I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your evening.
Thank you.
Thanks.